What up? I'm here on time. Look at that. 3 p.m. on the dot on a week that I should be on vacation. But I'm not. I'm doing this. But I'm having a good time, so it's all good. Lot to talk about today, as there always is. I thought this week was going to be kind of, I don't know, uneventful because it was Christmas this week, so not really much happens. But I do got some stories. So the media is having some incredible turnaround on Bernie Sanders that I can't yet explain, but I will try to explain it and show you some new examples that I have from MSNBC and CNN, though CNN has been a lot better on this. But they also have a segment out on Bernie. Also, MAGA world is in tears after Donald Trump was cut from Home Alone 2 on CBC. I'll talk about that. Pete Buttigieg attempts to fake his average donation by, well, you'll see how he did that. Just like his entire campaign, just, more fakeness. Trump pardoned a psychopath. Now, the pardoning happened a while ago, but there's some new information out now that I want to talk about involving that story. Some other data on the Bernie blackout that now appears to no longer exist, but I want to share that. What else? Kaepernick's Nikes sell out. This segment that I'll get to near the end of my stories. It's kind of a way for me to say, hey, I want these shoes, and can somebody find them for me? But ultimately, it's pretty cool that Kaepernick's doing well with those Nikes. Also, Bloomberg, prison labor. I'll touch on that story, though I don't want to pay too much attention to it because it's Bloomberg, whatever. And polls of the week. So there's less polls this week than usual, but I still got some data that, once again, puts Bernie Sanders in a good position. All right. Making sure everything looks good, sounds good, looking at the chat, no one's complaining. All right. I think we're fine. So then, I'm forgetting everything. I mean, it is a holiday week, so I'm not in the right mindset, but right there, rationalnational.com/join. That's the Patreon page. You can also become a YouTube member. That link is below this video. Also, the Streamlabs donation link, a PayPal donation link. Those are also great ways to support the show. Someone already sent a super chat in. Let me read that. Boogie O. Winston says, it's possible that the media is doing this such that if Bernie gets the nomination, they'll look less foolish, having covered him fairly beforehand. I guess. But, yeah, I mean, sure. I guess that's the reasoning, but it's just weird after this entire time, them trying to push a different narrative and just it completely failing. I mean, how long have they been trying to push Amy Klobuchar on people? And she just is not catching on. So I guess the day after Christmas is when they began to acknowledge reality, basically. All right. Also, yeah, super chats throughout the stream. I'll take those, and most of them at the end, probably. But let me get going with a very nice story to ease us into today's stream. So it appears after months of the Bernie blackout, or when the cable news does talk about Bernie Sanders, they were largely negative in covering him. MSNBC and CNN have now completely shifted gears and are actually covering him objectively. So I'm going to focus this segment on CNN. So CNN recently talked up Bernie Sanders and his chance of winning. To be fair, as I'm going to show you the tweet here, Ryan Nobles has been pretty good, pretty objective in his reporting on Bernie Sanders. But I guess it's the fact that everybody else, or I should say the network as a whole, is willing to recognize the Bernie Sanders campaign a little more than normal. So let's check out this clip here.
These headlines just from the last 24 hours or so. The New York Times, why Bernie Sanders is tough to beat. Politico, Democratic insiders say Bernie could win the nomination. Wall Street Journal, don't count Bernie out. And that's just a few of the headlines we've seen. They all tout his resiliency, an impressive rebound from a heart attack 2 months ago, and also his consistent slow climb in the polls. But they also emphasize a concern that his quiet rise is being overlooked. A Democratic chairman in Iowa tells the New York Times the following: Sanders is definitely being underestimated in Iowa. Part of his durability is he has 15 to 20% of the caucus who are absolutely committed to voting for him no matter what. That counts for a whole heck of a lot. CNN's Ryan Nobles has been covering the Sanders campaign closely and joins me now. So, Ryan, what are you hearing from inside about how they feel and from people around the campaign about whether this is real and maybe the right time to be on the rise?
You know, Dan, I have a text thread with Greg Krieg and Andy Grayer, who are helping me cover the Bernie Sanders campaign. And as these headlines started coming out, we were texting each other saying, this is what we've been saying for weeks, that the Sanders campaign is a lot stronger than many people are giving them credit for. And what's interesting when you talk to those aides and associates that are close to Senator Sanders, and even Senator Sanders himself, their confidence is a quiet confidence. Usually campaigns sometimes have to overstate exactly where they stand in the polls and where they stand in relation to other candidates. And what the Sanders campaign is, they don't overplay it. They have said what they've said from the beginning, that they believe that he has a strong shot at winning the Democratic nomination and that they're going to continue to stay in their lane. You know, campaign manager Faz Shakir often says to me that he operates on a scale of 1 to 10 between a 4 and a 6. He never gets too excited and they never get too down based on where they stand in the polls. But there is no question that there's been a remarkable shift in his position since he had that heart attack. Sanders is a different person on the campaign trail. He actually seems to have more energy and it's just a little bit looser. They believe that they can win. And really, when you look at where they stand in many of these polls, they are starting to rise slowly. They're not rocketing to the top of the polls as some of these other candidates have done. And the big thing you can't ignore, Dana, is the resources that Bernie Sanders has. He's raised more money than any of these other candidates from a wide range of donors. They believe that indicates that they even have more support than the polls are showing. People have underestimated Bernie Sanders before. It's happening this time around. But this, I think there is a realistic shot that he could win the Democratic nomination. There's a long way to go. But do not underestimate Bernie Sanders.
All right. Do not underestimate Bernie Sanders. That's the word from CNN. And they discuss everything I've been discussing for months. And of course, not just me, but other, online news outlets have been saying the same thing. Look at his support base. Look at his volunteer base. Look at the amount of donations he has, individual donations, the most by far out of anyone in the race. He hit over 1 million individual donors in September. Nobody has hit that number yet. Bernie has over 4 million individual donations. It's probably near 5 million at this point if it hasn't hit it already. Again, no one else near those numbers. The most volunteers, the most grassroots support, on the ground support. By every metric, he has the most individual donors from counties that flipped from Obama to Trump in 2016. I mean, if you want to talk about winning the election against Donald Trump, you need to get those counties. Bernie Sanders has those by far. He has triple the support that anyone else does in those Obama to Trump counties. So, I mean, we can go data point after data point. The fact that he's an independent senator, a lifelong independent, that appeals to a lot of people who hate this two-party system. You have someone here in Bernie Sanders who's willing to call out the establishment in both parties. I mean, his appeal is wide and obvious. The press has just largely either ignored it or sidelined him because it's not in their best interest to push a candidate out there or to even objectively cover a candidate that has a message that is antithetical to their corporate power. So I don't know what is really behind the shift here, because this is it's one thing if, one network did it or one newspaper did it, but it was completely overnight. You have Politico and the New York Times put out these two pieces that are pro Bernie Sanders, or not even pro Bernie Sanders, but objectively discussing that he has a great chance to win the nomination. And then you have MSNBC, which I'll show you later, discussing, Bernie Sanders can definitely win the nomination. when a week ago they were saying the opposite. And then you have CNN here with Dana Bash acknowledging this, even though, as I said, Ryan Nobles has done a great job on the ground covering the Bernie Sanders campaign. He has actually had objective reporting, unlike many other corporate news outlets. So this is just, I guess, acknowledging reality in the case that Bernie Sanders does win the nomination and they don't want to be behind like they were with Donald Trump. But at the same time, they have to recognize this also now softens up the cable news audience to potentially supporting Bernie Sanders, which before they weren't. So if you look at, any poll at all, Bernie Sanders, most of his support comes from voters under 45. So yes, he has some supporters over 45, over 60, but the majority of Bernie's support comes from the under 45 group. And those are people that generally don't really stick to cable news too much. They'll take in, they'll read what's online, they'll watch YouTube videos. So they kind of have a greater idea of what this primary is actually about, who the candidates actually are, and those people support Bernie Sanders because they're actually educated on the issues and on the candidates. But now, if you have cable news actually educating people on who Bernie Sanders is, objectively reporting on his campaign and his chances, that could potentially grow his support for those voters over 45. But that remains to be seen. All right. I got more coming up on MSNBC on this topic, but I'm going to jump around a little bit because I can't give you all the good stuff at the beginning, because then why would you stick around? I gotta move things around, So, actually, to be fair, though, all these stories are pretty great. And I'm not just saying that so you stick around. But the next one I'm going to be talking about is Donald Trump being cut from Home Alone 2 on CBC. And, the mega tears were flowing. But I got to set this up for myself. Many links in this one to reference, including a website that I used to work for is involved in this. You'll see what that's about. And there are many links here. Okay. Did I hear a super chat? I may have. May have heard several. Man, YouTube's interface is not good. It won't show me all the super chats, so I have to dig into my settings. Give me a second. This whole Christmas, I've been waiting to play video games, and haven't had enough time. It's crazy. I've been like craving. I've been playing this Star Wars game, and I want to beat it. And I thought I would take some time off, but this is the kind of thing where it's like, if you take any day off news, you fall behind, and you don't really know what's going on. I mean, you can catch up, but it sets you back. What am I doing? Here we go. All right. Mandy Sadowski sends me a really cute cat face and $3. Thank you so much, Mandy. Lil the Great, I'm not sure if I read that right, says, is it odd that blackout was over everywhere at once? Yeah, it is odd. And I talked a bit about that just now, but it is odd that it all happened at once. Phil Spargo says, keep up the good work. Thank you, Phil. All right, I'll get to more super chats later. Let me get to this Donald Trump story. MAGA world is in tears after their Lord and Savior, Donald Trump, was cut from CBC's airing of Home Alone 2. Now, CBC is Canada's public broadcaster. So in case you don't know what CBC is. And this is in relation to Trump having a cameo appearance in Home Alone 2, and they cut it in the airing of this movie. Now, I'll get to exactly why it was cut in a minute here. But first, I want to show you kind of where this all started. So apparently, the first place this was covered was comicbook.com. Now, I used to work for this website, believe it or not. So Comic Book and Screen Rant, they're like the same company. I used to work for the site. But so they reported on this, and they didn't do it like... Here's the thing with these kind of sites. You're looking for news to cover, right? Hey, it's hard to find news on Christmas Day. So they found some news, though. They found some tweets of people talking about, oh, why was Donald Trump cut from Home Alone 2 on CBC? And they made a news story out of it. It wasn't, done in a way that they were complaining about it. They were just reporting on what they saw on Twitter. So once that happened, eventually, Dipshit Jr. here picked it up. Pathetic. Canada's CBC under fire when Trump's cameo in Home Alone 2 disappears from Christmas broadcast. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, again, we'll get to why it was cut. You'll understand in a minute here, and why it's nothing to be crying about. Here's an example of one of the mega whiners here crying about this. Ryan Fournier. He is, I believe, what is it? The founder of Trump Students. The founder of Trump Students right here, Mr. Ryan. CBC TV in Canada has cut Donald Trump's Home Alone 2 cameo out of their broadcast. They're so triggered by him that they had to edit him out of the film. Absolutely pathetic. Okay. Again, I'll get to why this happened. First, let's watch Fox News reacting to this, because we all know they're going to have a very sane take on this.
Because they needed to leave room for commercials. That's the one part. That's right. 6 or 7 seconds they cut.
Right, but that was...
By the way, there's more to it than just that, but let's continue.
A great 6-second commercial they had for whatever it was,
But how bad is your
poutine or
Trump
whatever.
derangement syndrome for you to cut that out of a happy movie?
Well, I think they're actually terrified that people will remember that before he was the new Hitler, he was actually a beloved mainstream cultural figure. He's in every... If you're going to start cutting him out, he's on the Regis Philbin Christmas album in the middle of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Regis, it's a terrific album, by the way. If you still want to play Christmas music on Boxing Day, Regis is the way to go. And then one foggy Christmas Eve, the Trumpster came to say, Blitzen, you're fired, Rudolph, you're hired. That's who Donald Trump was before he was the new Hitler. And I think they're terrified of these little things that will remind people of just how deranged his opponents
It's also censorship. But let's move.
Okay. It's not censorship. This is why Donald Trump was cut from Home Alone 2. Again, cut from CBC's airing of Home Alone 2. CBC responds to criticism that short scene featuring Donald Trump was deleted from movie Home Alone 2, which aired recently. Spokesperson says several cuts made for time. These edits were done in 2014 when we first acquired the film and before Mr. Trump was elected president. If you've watched any movie on television, I mean, be it like TBS back in the day, I used to always watch TBS would play movies, but whatever, CBC, whoever, these broadcasters always cut scenes because they want to keep the movie within like the hour and a half or 2 hour frame that they have for the movie. So to fit it in and be able to fit commercials during that movie, they cut pieces out. So it's not like only Donald Trump's scene was deleted and then nothing else was deleted. No. They deleted multiple pieces of this film, parts that didn't really matter, that they could cut out of the film, and, the story is still the same. They cut those pieces out, and they did it in 2014. So this is obviously well before Donald Trump ran for president and became president. So, again, this is just mega whiners complaining about nothing. Donald Trump himself also responded to this. And to be fair, before I even show you his response, he's actually, I mean, I think he took it all right, but judge for yourself. So let me just read this. I guess Justin Trudeau doesn't much like my making him pay up on NATO or trade. Okay, so this looks like he's being serious, right? But minutes later, he tweets this. The movie will never be the same. Just kidding. I don't think Donald Trump even cares, to be honest, about this story, as you can tell by the just kidding. Like, this is the part of Donald Trump, like this just kidding part. This part of Donald Trump is why some people found him appealing in 2016. Now, again, if you're still on the Trump train, I think it's time to get off because this is not who the man normally is. But there's this side of him where he's just like sometimes a funny kind of guy, and he doesn't take himself too seriously. At least he used to not take himself all that seriously. Now he does a lot more, and clearly he's deranged. He has problems. He not even just himself, but the way his administration operates and his policies. But like this side of him, this side of him that is not this very rehearsed person. That is what is appealing to a political figure like Donald Trump. But it's also what's appealing to, political figures like Bernie Sanders, who's also a real person and not a complete asshole. So this is another, I mean, not to turn every story into a pro-Bernie story, but this is another reason why Bernie Sanders is the best candidate to go up against Donald Trump, because he is that anti-establishment, typical, regular kind of guy person that at the same time also actually cares about people. So while Donald Trump ran on, being that guy that says whatever's on his mind and also said things like, oh, healthcare, yeah, you'll all be covered, when he never meant any of it, Bernie Sanders is also that same kind of person in the sense that he is a real person. He's not, he's not rehearsed. He just says what he thinks. He says what he feels. He's been fighting for the same thing for 40 years. And on top of that, he actually means things when he says, hey, I think everybody should have healthcare. He actually means that. And he has policies to back that up. So that's where the dividing line is on this kind of, this kind of political figure that is more appealing nowadays. Like your standard, typical, rehearsed politician that, sticks to the script. These politicians they're not likable because people have learned finally over the past 40 years that, hey, these politicians, they're actually lying to us all the time. Maybe we should support somebody. Maybe we should vote somebody in that is being honest to us and has a track record of being honest and, being different than what you expect from a typical politician. But ultimately, getting back to the movie here, this story is much ado about nothing. All right. I haven't watched Home Alone 2 in a long time, I gotta say. Though I do like those movies quite a bit. I don't think I even watched one Christmas movie this year. Feels like an oversight on my part. It's just too much working. I don't know. All right, let me get some more super chats before I move on here. Rob Dom says, it's almost as though mainstream media is trying to prevent backlash from Sanders when he starts making sweeping changes. We should demand a 2020 fairness doctrine. That's a good idea, actually. I know Bernie Sanders has doesn't he have a plan, a media plan? I got to look into it again because I know he released something about, I think it was breaking up media giants, but yeah, I don't want to look into that now. But I do agree with you. Something like a fairness doctrine would be a great idea. Tony sends a super chat in saying Pelosi will use the timing of the impeachment against Bernie Sanders. Let's not forget that her and McConnell share the same donors. We'll see, right? Like, we'll see. Like, here's the I get what you're saying. At the same time, I don't even think it's going to hurt Bernie Sanders. Like, say, Bernie Sanders has so much on-the-ground support and high-profile endorsements like AOC or Michael Moore that they could be out campaigning for him while he's in the Senate during the the process of trying to convict Trump. So, look, it's part of the job as a senator to be in that trial, and I think it's important for Bernie to be there. And ultimately, I don't think it'll hurt him. I do think it will actually hurt Elizabeth Warren more, because Warren doesn't have those high-profile endorsements, and she also has to be in the Senate during this whole thing. But I don't think it'll even hurt Bernie all that much, especially if he starts winning and Pelosi holds this impeachment for whatever reason past the early voting states. So if Bernie wins those early states, it's not really going to matter if he's on the campaign trail or not, because he'll have momentum. All right. I just heard a new super chat, but I'll get to that after. Let me prep the next story here. So following the recent debate where it was exposed that Pete Buttigieg had a wine cave fundraiser with wealthy donors, in addition to the fact that he has the second most billionaire donors in the race, the Buttigieg campaign is now trying to artificially lower their average donation. So let me show you this. Before I show you the tweet, though, and the information here, his average donation right now is $40 a piece, compared to Elizabeth Warren's at $27 and Bernie Sanders at $18 a piece, meaning that the vast majority of Bernie's donors are smaller individual donors, whereas Buttigieg is getting a lot of his money from wealthy donors, the max being $2,800, but also he can have bundlers that kind of collect all that money at the same time and give him these giant chunks of change. But because of that, because they're being it's exposed now that Buttigieg has all these wealthy donors that he's getting from these massive fundraisers. They are trying to pretend that actually, no, we have a low average donation in a few weeks once this whole campaign is over. Let me show you what they try to do here. So Tim Tagaris tweets us out. The Pete for America Innovation team out there working hard on Christmas Eve, coming up with gimmicks to lower his average donation amount this quarter. Funny stuff. So this is the email that went out. All you have to do to win is donate the smallest amount that nobody else donates. In other words, suppose you donate $1. If someone else playing also donated exactly $1, you both lose. We'll see if only one player donated 1.01, and so on until we find an amount donated exactly once, and that's our winner. That's it. Those are the rules. Only donations that are part of this contest count from this email, and let's be real, we might send you a reminder or two, but that's it. Multiple donations are allowed. Just be creative, pick a unique donation amount, and you could win. So do you see what they're doing here? They're trying to get Buttigieg supporters to donate multiple times, but donate very small amounts, so that it ends up lowering the average donation that Pete Buttigieg has. Because they can't actually create any real grassroots support, they're going to try and fake it by being able to say, in the next debate, oh, Pete Buttigieg, actually, he has the lowest average individual donation. Of course, they wouldn't tell you that this campaign would be the reason for that. So, look, we're going to see if it works. At the same time, I don't really understand it. Like, you could be one person and donate $1, $1.01, $1.02, $1.03. Like, what donation? How are they going to find one person that donated an exact amount that no one else donated? It just seems unlikely that would happen unless Buttigieg really has like almost zero small donors, because at some point you're going to be hitting all the numbers. So it doesn't, I don't quite get how this contest works, but the impact of it obviously will be to lower or artificially lower his average donation. But ultimately here, he's not fooling anybody. It's too late. The cat's out of the bag. I'm glad that Warren on the debate stage brought up the fact that he had this Wine K fundraiser. And I'm glad that Bernie Sanders brought up that Pete Buttigieg and Biden are competing over who has the most billionaire donors. I think that really helped expose where the dividing line is in this race and who is fighting for who. So you have Bernie actually fighting for real people, Pete Buttigieg, Joe Biden fighting for the wealthy. All right. Like, this is the cute, typical politician BS that doesn't work anymore. For campaigns to continue to try to do things like this and think they're not going to get exposed, or it's just not going to become so obvious to people that you're just lying to them. Like, it's amazing that a candidate so young can be running a campaign that's like straight out of the 80s. It's absurd. All right. I think I heard a super chat earlier. Big donation from Henry Volt, $10. Thank you, Henry. An article off of San Francisco Gate says that there was a computer glitch that altered the party alignment of 2,000 voters living in a county area in San Francisco. Think someone is trying to pull a fast one. I don't know about this story, but I mean, we've heard stories like this, and it's not even just glitches. I mean, oftentimes they're just like, yeah, we're just getting rid of a ton of voters off the voter rolls, like in Georgia, for example. And it's a way to try and suppress the vote. It obviously is, which is why you have to be super engaged. Like, ensure that you are registered in your state. Check, double check, triple check. Get your friends and family to check and double check. Like, go to that site that I always tell you about, voteforbernie.org. Vote for, F-O-R, Bernie.org. You click on your state. It tells you where exactly or when exactly you have to register by, when your primary or caucus day is, all that stuff. It gives you all the information. And stay on top of that stuff, because that's the only way to avoid some of this weirdness that may be happening during the process. Of course, I opened up the wrong program. All right. Okay, this story. Just setting up the next story, which I'll get to in a minute. All right, let me check the super chat that I just heard. Lil the Great, I'm not sure if I'm saying your name right, sorry, but says Bernie can recuse himself from impeachment. So I heard someone else bring this up. I'm not sure if he can. I'll look into that. But I'm not even sure if he should, to be quite honest with you. Like, if he feels like he should recuse himself from the trial because he's potentially running against him, then sure, do it. But don't recuse yourself because you think it may hurt you in the race, because I don't think it would hurt him in the race, and it's kind of part of his job. And you could see the media narrative both ways. If he recused himself, they can say, "Oh, Bernie's not doing his job. Does he actually support Trump's impeachment? I mean, maybe he doesn't." And he just, there could be a media narrative around that, or there could be one around him, not recusing himself, and people saying, "Well, should Bernie really be in the trial because he might go up against Donald Trump in the fall, so he should probably recuse himself." Like, they're going to get him either way in terms of media coverage on it. But, like, if the whole point is to ensure he's on the campaign trail because he thinks if he's in the trial it might hurt him, I don't know if that's really what he should do. Levo says, I really want to donate to Bernie, but I live in Canada. Is it possible to donate to him? No, you cannot donate from Canada. I mean, they always ask you for like zip code and all that stuff, and they verify your address. Yeah, you can't donate from any other country. But somebody was saying, a recent super chat in a previous stream was saying that you can volunteer, but I think you have to live in the country for that to happen, unless you can phone bank from abroad. I'm not sure about that, but yeah, I'm not too sure how you can really help Bernie. But if you have any friends or family in the U.S., educate them. That's a way to do it. All right. This freaking story is disturbing, as you're going to find out. New leaked video has come out showing fellow Navy SEALs calling Edward Gallagher essentially a psychopath. So Gallagher is the Navy SEAL that was pardoned by Donald Trump in November. And this information that has come out about him, I mean, it was already clear before that Edward Gallagher was not a good person based on the information that we have. But now there's new information out from his fellow Navy SEALs that really paints a picture that this guy is not well and should not have been pardoned. So let me show you some of this here. So Slate quotes one of the Navy SEALs talking about Edward Gallagher here, saying, they say, "You could tell he was perfectly okay with killing anybody that was moving." So that's just one quote out of a number of quotes about his fellow Navy SEALs and their thoughts on him. I'm going to play this piece from NBC. It's actually a really good breakdown of this. So let me share this.
There is news this morning on a case we followed very closely here on Today involving retired Navy SEAL Edward Gallagher. NBC's senior national correspondent Kate Snow is here with that story. Good morning, Kate.
Kristen, as you know, this is a case the president has been personally involved in. This past summer, Gallagher was acquitted of shooting civilians and killing a captive ISIS fighter. But this morning, The Weekly, a TV series from the New York Times, has exclusively obtained Navy interviews with the SEAL team members who accused Gallagher of misconduct in the first place. Up until now, they had only been quoted in trial. We want to warn you, what you're about to see and hear is disturbing.
The platoon members come in and they paint a picture of a platoon leader who has gone totally rogue. They say that he was killing people just to kill them, men, women, children, it didn't matter.
The guy was toxic. We can't let this continue.
The Times reviewed hundreds of text messages they say were sent by Gallagher, disparaging the SEALs who reported him.
He is repeatedly reaching out to other SEALs, telling them about this investigation and how angry he is. And he wants to spread the names of his accusers to make sure people know, in the hopes that they will be blacklisted by other SEALs.
Helmet camera video obtained by The Weekly, never seen outside of a courtroom, shows the ISIS fighter prosecutors accused Gallagher of murdering. Gallagher is seen with a medic bag pushing him, and then the camera goes black. It's not clear why.
You say he stabbed him one time, multiple times.
In 2018, SEAL team member Corey Scott told investigators he saw Gallagher stab the ISIS fighter multiple times.
It was probably 2 or 3 times.
Okay.
It was just like a stab about right here, just in a few times.
Is there any possible way that what he was doing could be interpreted as for medical purposes to help this guy?
No.
There's no way this was anything other than to attack and to kill this person?
No.
But Scott changed his story at Gallagher's trial and said he was the one who killed the fighter.
Did you suffocate him?
Yes.
Eddie Gallagher was convicted of posing for a photo with the corpse. He was found not guilty of murder and attempted murder and has long proclaimed his innocence.
There's a couple of members of the platoon who had a personal animosity towards Eddie Gallagher. They didn't perform well in combat. They were afraid of being called out for being cowards. They made up a story and they went with it.
Overnight, Gallagher's attorney calling their accounts unsupported and fake.
If there was a problem with Chief Gallagher's mental state, they would have examined him. They would have found that, but there's none.
In November, President Trump ordered the Pentagon not to strip Gallagher of his rank and trident pin. The Navy secretary was fired for his handling of the case. The president publicly showing support for the Navy SEAL.
He was a great fighter. He was one of the ultimate fighters. Tough guy.
Just this weekend, Gallagher posting photos meeting President Trump for the first time at Mar-a-Lago. The Navy SEALs and an attorney for Corey Scott are not commenting. NBC News has not spoken with any of the individual SEALs shown in those taped interviews, but the New York Times has reached out to every one of them. They all declined to comment in print and on camera. Gallagher's lawyer tells us that he plans to file a lawsuit, guys, against the Weekly and against the reporter.
And Kate, you mentioned that the New York Times reviewed text messages that had been sent by Gallagher, but those weren't the only ones, right?
Right. They also looked at group text messages that were sent between the SEALs who you just saw, who reported Gallagher. One of them saying, "We are going to answer to a higher power someday, and everything happens for a reason. Not compromising our integrity and keeping right on our side is all we can do." Gallagher's attorney says those text messages between those guys show that they were coordinating their stories.
Certainly has gotten a lot of attention, Kate.
And I think it will again today.
We should note, by the way, that you can watch the full episode of The Weekly on Hulu. It's available right now.
All right, that gives you a good overview. This is the kind of story where it just shows you how evil this Trump administration is. Like, what's Trump's play here? When you have other Navy SEALs, like when Edward Gallagher is in the minority here, and other Navy SEALs are saying the opposite of what Trump's been saying about Gallagher, like, I don't really understand who you're appealing to. I mean, when you look at even something like the breakdown of the military contributions, look, Bernie Sanders has the most support from military families by far. Look, Trump's down here in third place. And so there's this like media narrative out there that, oh, Trump's on the side of the military. But when he has moves like this, it's just he's on the side of evil. Like he's not on the side of the military. He's on the side of evil. Now, sure, he's on the side of military contractors that look to make lots of money by blowing shit up. But Bernie Sanders is on the side of actual people that are in the military. So there is definitely a serious divide here from like what reality is and what we're told from Trump himself and the way that Trump is covered in the media and his apparent support from the military that doesn't really exist. So the whole story is just incredibly, it's disgusting, but it's also weird. And I have a hard time understanding why he would pardon someone like this when it's so clear that everybody else around him paints a completely different picture about who Edward Gallagher is. All right. I saw some super chats. Let me get those. Nick Cerulli sends $2. Thank you, Nick. Richard Wise says Lee Majors passed away, leaving the Trump campaign $6 million. He died on the operating table at 80 years old, getting a penile enlargement. That's not a true story. That's not a true story. That's actually a parody. So that's not true. If you heard that, that did not happen. But thank you, Richard, for the super chat. All right. We're getting to the MSNBC stuff. Don't you worry. First, there's more stories here than I thought there were. Here we go. So just a week before the corporate media's awakening of Bernie Sanders' chances at the nomination, they're now saying that he actually has a chance, when for months and months and months they're saying Bernie Sanders has no chance. Data was collected proving that the Bernie blackout does indeed exist. So I've done a lot of reporting on this. I mean, the most obvious example to me that sticks out is when PBS did an 8-minute segment on the 2020 primary race and didn't mention Bernie Sanders once, even though Bernie's been polling in the top 3 of the entire race, has the most individual donors, the most individual donations, I believe the most money in the race out of anybody. Didn't touch him or didn't cover him once in that 8-minute segment. And this is a consistent theme with most of corporate media and their coverage, even though PBS isn't corporate media. But most of corporate media's coverage of the race. Until today, which, again, in other segments, I discuss. But let me show you this data here, because this isn't just anecdotal. This is, in fact, data that has been collected to prove that the Bernie blackout is indeed real. So this is a great Twitter thread here by Irie Hawks, who breaks it down. Weekly TV and online news media mentions. So this is one of 7 tweets. Let's start with the big picture. The Bernie blackout is very strong, even on an eventful week. The Bloomberg bubble has deflated a bit, still a bit over-mentioned relative to polling. Media loves Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg. So this here is really obvious to anybody that has been covering what's been going on. But if you go down to the information here, this is really, the picture is obvious. So Biden is mentioned about the right amount for him being in first. Warren is undercovered a little bit, a difference right there of 2. Buttigieg covered more than he should be, of course. Sanders, 9.7 in the red. So meaning he's polling here nationally around 21.8%. But his global mention share is only 12%. So he's covered a lot less than where he is in the polling. Again, this is obvious to anyone that's been paying attention and anyone that's been watching cable news. Klobuchar, way over heavily covered. So she polls at about 3%, and her global share here is 7.9%. And the rest are kind of, where they should be, I guess. And yeah, everyone else hovers around 0. So the only real huge difference here, huge swings, 9.7 for Bernie. Let's go a little deeper, see what CNN specifically was doing here. So Biden, again, about where he should be. Warren covered a little less than she should be. Sanders, 8.9. Again, covered a lot less than he should be relative to his polling. We don't need to go through everybody else, but you can see Pete Buttigieg doing very well here with 4. Let's check Klobuchar, 6.1, of course. So Klobuchar and Pete, again, the most covered. Let's look at MSNBC. This is when things get crazy. 11.9 for Sanders, a negative 11.9. So again, polling at 21.8%. His share of mentions, 9.9%. Biden also being undercovered, but not by a lot, just 2.8. Warren, a tiny bit overcovered here, but that's actually, that's consistent with where she is in polling. Buttigieg, overcovered, 6.5. Klobuchar, overcovered, 7. Ridiculous. Look at this. 10% of the share, 14% of the share, only 3.1% in polling, 7.7% in polling. Absurd. The rest about where they should be. Fox News. Now, Fox News, I thought they would actually cover Bernie more because they can kind of use or try to use him as the boogeyman. But I think even they know that he's incredibly popular. I mean, when they had him on for a town hall and he had the entire Fox News audience clapping for Medicare for All, I think that kind of scared them off the idea of maybe we shouldn't cover Bernie Sanders too much because he's actually popular. So same deal here. Well undercovered, 8.4. Biden overcovered, 6.8, because they want to have that, they want to create that. If anybody looks just as bad as Trump in the race, it's Joe Biden. So if they can show Joe Biden stumbling his words, forgetting Barack Obama's name, doing whatever Joe Biden does, talking about his hairy legs, then they're going to do that because it's going to make Joe Biden look horrible compared to Donald Trump, who, again, is more horrible, but these still are 2 horrible candidates. And everyone else here, Buttigieg overcovered, Yang overcovered, surprisingly, for Fox News. Gabbard, surprisingly undercovered, even though she's been on Fox News a few times. But around I guess kind of where they should be. I'm not sure if there's more to this thread. Oh, there is. So ABC, NBC, CBS. Interesting. Wow. Okay. So Bloomberg. Look at this. Bloomberg. The difference of 35. So he's pulling around 5%. His share of coverage is 40%. Insane. Joe Biden undercovered at 14. Actually, the most undercovered, which is very interesting here. Warren undercovered. Sanders undercovered. Who else is overcovered here? Klobuchar. Buttigieg undercovered. Also surprising to me. Everyone else, who really cares? So that's man, the Bloomberg number though. That really is something. Let's see what this is about. This is the breakdown for each tracked TV network and the total coverage across all channels. A lone voice reminded us that Marianne Williamson still exists and is running for president. All right. So you got Bernie here. Again, the most undercovered at 9.9. Yeah. Klobuchar, the most overcovered. Yeah. That tends to be what we're all feeling. So this backs it up. But it's going to be, I want to see this next week, because now Bernie Sanders is actually being covered properly, as I mentioned. Before I finish here, though, let's look at the online mentions. Online news mentions. Sanders still doesn't perform better. So let's check this out. Again, of course, he's in the red at 9.5, as is Warren, and every other candidate is up in the green. So there you go. But as I said, I wonder if this will shift starting, I guess next week or this week, when Sanders is now actually being covered properly, at least somewhat properly. So I haven't seen all the coverage of him, but there have been actual objective segments covering the Sanders campaign and their chances at the nomination. I don't say positive segments because sure, they're positive by nature, but they're just objectively covering that he has a good shot based on his support base and how dedicated they are to him. So I'm curious to see if that's going to shift these numbers, but we'll have to wait and see for that. All right. Next is MSNBC. This one's a big one. Just prepping the story. I heard a super chat. I'll get to that in a second. Now, there's a video in this story. I'm not sure if I'm going to show the whole thing, because there's a Morning Joe segment on Bernie, but it's 5 minutes long. I may play the whole thing here, and then when I cut the segment up later, I may short down that clip. But yeah, because 5 minutes is a big chunk of video for a segment, but we will see. All right, I heard a super chat. Let me get to that. J-Mac says, you, Secular Talk, Michael Brooks, and the Humanist Report need to form some kind of new radical left-wing party. Plus, you're all gorgeous people inside it out, especially you. Oh, thank you, J-Mac. I'm not sure how a party would work, but you have Just Democrats in the U.S. There you go. Here in Canada, we kind of have the NDP, sometimes. But in terms of our options, yeah, definitely the NDP or even the Greens if you support the Green Party. But yeah, all those shows are great. Check them all out. Secular Talk, Michael Brooks, Humanist Report. I watch them all. Definitely fantastic allies in this movement. MLE says, yes, you can volunteer from outside the U.S. You can phone bank, text for Bernie, and much more. BernieSanders.com/volunteer. All right, there you go. So for all you people that are abroad, BernieSanders.com/volunteer. And I guess you can volunteer there. Richard Weiss says, David, you ruined my day. That was after telling Richard that the Lee Majors story about him passing away and leaving Trump $6 million is in fact not real. Sorry, Richard. But yeah, I'm glad I looked that up. That popped up as we were watching a video from the previous segment. So I was able to look it up because it sounded really suspect. And yeah, it's not a real story. Craig Reeves sends a super chat in saying, it is hilarious how the mainstream media is trying to make Klobuchar happen. It is hilarious, but I don't know how much longer they can keep it up. I mean, she's not raising its support. I mean, they've tried their hardest to really get her in this race, but it's not happening. So at some point, they kind of got to let her go and just move on from Klobuchar mania. All right. Big segment. Big MSNBC segment. I like covering media stuff. It's fun. It's, I don't know why. I enjoy doing it. So MSNBC had a Bernie Sanders love fest following Christmas Day. So I'm not sure what the hell happened. I covered in a previous video how there have been, so on the day after Christmas, 2 articles released, one in Politico, one in the New York Times, essentially saying that, hey, Bernie Sanders actually has a real shot at the nomination because we finally looked at the data, we looked at the polling numbers, we looked at his on-the-ground support, we looked at his individual donations, and we can see from all the information that, yes, in fact, Bernie Sanders has a really good shot at this nomination. Since those articles went out, it's just been the mainstream press actually acknowledging that, oh, Bernie Sanders can really win this. Before I show you that, though, I want to flash back to just a week ago. Because a week ago, they were saying something completely different, and this was typical of what you expected from mainstream media coverage of Bernie Sanders.
Elizabeth Warren backed off of Medicare for All. She was like, I want to get as much as I can, as fast as I can. It was a capitulation. And Bernie Sanders went all in again on Medicare.
What do you think that is he trying to leapfrog her to the left?
He's trying to get all those progressives back. Remember, there was really positioning wise, there was only 2 progressives left on the stage.
Is she falling between the cracks right now?
I think she was hurt the most last night. And I'll tell you why. The reason, and some people will hate this, but the reason Joe Biden had such a great debate last night because he wasn't the front runner. He wasn't attacked. And guess who showed him how to be a front runner and get attacked? Pete Buttigieg. Because he took it all ways and he had answers for everything. By the way, I don't think the mayor thing hurt him at all. Pete Buttigieg is on this stage not because because of his resume, as she wants to say. He's on the stage because he got support. He's got support.
Who do you think are the front runners now? Is it Biden, Buttigieg, and Warren? Are they the 3 that really can win this thing?
And Sanders. I think Sanders is still
Sanders can still win the nomination.
I don't know if he can win the nomination, but he's going to be a front runner.
Who can still win the nomination?
I don't know if Biden. I mean, I'm sorry, Sanders can win the nomination, but yes, I do think it's down between Biden, Warren, and Buttigieg. And I think that's what you saw kind of play out last night. Amy Klobuchar knows that she needs to get in that top 4. Right now, she's in the top 5 to 6, right? The only way that I think she sees her path to doing that is to go after Mayor Pete's voters. And that's why you saw her draw a contrast. You guys will remember.
Because they're the same voters.
Because in large part, they're the same voters, those pragmatic Midwestern moderate Democrats.
I'm impressed by Buttigieg. He has a broadcaster's voice. I don't know where the hell he got it. But when they got into the thick of things last night, he seemed strong. I think Klobuchar sounds really good, too. What did you think about Buttigieg when he was under attack last night?
I think he was someone who showed that he could be nimble, someone who also showed that he could be turning the tables on someone. I think one of the most memorable things he said was Elizabeth Warren is trying to issue purity tests that she can't herself pass. And he basically made the case, look, you're trying to attack me, but remember, I'm the poorest person on this stage. You're a millionaire, and you had millionaire donors just like me.
I think there's 3 guys making pickups last night. I mean, Klobuchar picked up points, definitely. I think Buttigieg definitely went up a bit. And who else? Biden. Biden had a good night. He did not have a bad.
All right, enough of this crap. So this was the day after the debate. This is how Bernie Sanders was typically covered, just almost completely ignored. And then when he's brought up, by what's her name here? By Adrienne Elrod. Chris Matthews says he like pushes her on this. You really think Bernie can win? And then like he basically puts her into a corner where she has to admit, oh, I guess he can't win. No, but definitely Biden and Buttigieg. Like, just anything that's even positive said about Bernie Sanders, they have to question it and really dig in deep until they reverse their position. So again, that was the day after the debate. The day after Christmas, it was a lot different.
What does it tell us that it is late December and this piece is being written?
Yeah. Well, look, Bernie Sanders has 1 million donors. He's raised the second most amount of money, second to Trump's at over $70 million. He's remained relatively consistent in the polls. He recovered from a heart attack. He's been one of the more consistent debaters. If you look at statewide polls and national polls, he's somewhere between 1, 2, or 3. And for him, if he's viable at 15%, which is what he's going to need to be in Iowa and all the different counties and across, this country, he's going to accumulate a lot of delegates. He may not win the nomination, but he is going to accumulate a lot of delegates.
But what does it say that it is this moment in which the establishment is willing to, first of all, do you agree that that's where the establishment is, that they're willing to admit that Sanders may be the nominee?
Well, he may be the nominee. Right. I mean, I don't think there's no way around that. I mean, if you look at where he is in the polling, if you look at how he's doing with money, I mean, he's going to be able to stay in all the way to Milwaukee because he's going to be able to raise money all day long.
If you are Bernie Sanders, do you want the establishment wrapping their arms around you? I mean, certainly from an infrastructure vantage point, you do. But in this primary, does it behoove him?
Well, it's certainly been good for his message and his campaign.
Let me just pause there for a second, because it sounds like the host here, while covering his chances, Bernie's chances that he has, objectively a great shot at winning here, she's trying to make it sound like the establishment is wrapping their arms around Bernie Sanders, which is not what's happening. Like, it's a way to try and poison the well and act like, oh, Bernie Sanders, you think he's populist. Actually, the Democratic Party now loves him just because there's like 2 articles out acknowledging the reality that, yes, he can win the nomination. So you can see how even when they're doing objective coverage here, they're trying to kind of paint it in a way that still can paint negatively or make Bernie Sanders look bad to his supporters. But it's not going to work, because ultimately the cable news audience is the audience that doesn't support Bernie Sanders anyway. So them covering him and covering that he objectively has a shot at winning this actually helps his chances with those voters over 45. Let me continue this clip, though.
Pain to be the person who's being dumped on by the media and dumped on by the establishment. But the truth is, you could have written this article at any time in the past 8 months. I don't blame Politico for writing it. It's well timed because the primaries are now upon us. But he has always been a front runner, and Biden has led for most of the campaign. But the most enduring feature of this primary so far is how unchanging it has been, with a few exceptions like Warren rising. So yeah, of course he could be the nominee.
By the way, his favorables are very high as well. The problem Sanders has is he has a base that holds to him in the same way that Trump does. That's not a problem. The problem is, can he go beyond that base the way Trump is not going to be able to go beyond his base? And I think if you elect someone like Sanders, who represents a radical change in the economy, which, by the way, is by all metrics is going very well. You elect someone like that who wants to change the economy, you introduce a whole set of unknowns, and I think that's going to be very difficult to bring those Republican voters that now Biden is talking about bringing over into his camp.
So just to respond to that end part there, the Bernie Sanders campaign is not going after Republican voters because they understand reality. They know that Republicans, it's like 89, 90% of them support Donald Trump, if not higher. The Republican base is the Trump base. They're going to come out and vote for Trump regardless of the Democratic nominee. So in order to beat Donald Trump, you have to bring out typical non-voters. You have to bring out young people. You have to bring out independents. That's where Bernie Sanders' strength is. He gets the young people. He gets the independents. He gets the typical non-voters. That's how they're going to reach out and win not just the nomination, but the election against Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton lost because she wasn't even able to bring out the base, let alone independents, let alone non-voters. So Bernie Sanders is able to speak to those voters that didn't come out last time. In addition to, when you're going up against Donald Trump, you're going to bring out a lot of voters who don't care about any of this, but they hate Donald Trump, and they're going to vote for the Democratic nominee against Donald Trump because they want Trump out. So Bernie Sanders, by far, out of anybody in the race, has the best chance to defeat Donald Trump because he's able to bring all these pieces together. in addition to the fact, I mean, the reason why he's so appealing to younger voters and to voters that haven't voted in a while is because Bernie Sanders is a lifelong independent. He calls out the establishment in both parties. He calls out the media establishment, the corporate establishment, the political establishment. Bernie Sanders has no allegiances to either party or to the media or corporations or anything. He is aligned to the people. That is incredibly attractive to many non-voters that have been disillusioned by this two-party system. So that's how Bernie Sanders is going to win. So even though they're, again, objectively covering in parts here Bernie's chances at the nomination, they're going to try and skew it in a way to make it sound like, oh, he can win this nomination, but he can't beat Trump, so we have to scare people from voting for him. Or they're going to do it the other way, as you saw the host doing. Oh, the establishment now is wrapping their arms around Bernie Sanders. Just like total, just complete hilariousness. Let's watch this. So this piece, though, is actually, I think, from what I remember, 100% positive on Bernie Sanders. And it's Al Sharpton. So this is on Morning Joe. Again, this is, I believe, now 2 days after Christmas. Watch what Al Sharpton says.
As you look at the candidates, and I've been to every debate, Bernie Sanders is the one candidate on the stage more than anyone else that people are supporting him because they believe in what he believes in. Yeah. He's not running as a politician. He's running as one leading a movement, and he says that. And I think that is why he will remain in the top three, and that is why he's winning, because people are voting for what they believe in. Later this morning, 11 o'clock, I have Reverend Jesse Jackson coming up to our headquarters. He's launching a new book, Keeping Hope Alive. We supported Reverend Jackson, Bernie Sanders did in the 80s, because we believed in what he was saying. So when people come with a scorecard of can this work or can this pass or not, it's no, should it pass? And that's what the people that are supporting Bernie are saying. We don't know if he'll get this through, but we know we want it through. And that's a little different than the people that are trying to measure everything by, can I get past this? You have one that, James McGregor Burns wrote a book, Leadership. You have transactional leaders, you have transformative leaders. Bernie has ran a transformative campaign.
This is Al Sharpton's best moment this entire primary season. It is so rare, honestly, for Al Sharpton to have like a coherent argument for anything. But in this case, he gets it. He understands that Bernie, what his movement is about and how that excites people out to support him. So this was a smaller piece of a larger segment here. Let me play this.
Let's move along. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders' 2020 campaign seems to be catching the attention, at least of some Democratic insiders, finally, as some new reports highlight his potential to win the party's nomination. Politico reporting that over the past few weeks, Democratic officials, political operatives, and pundits have reconsidered Sanders' chances in 2020. They point to Senator Elizabeth Warren's recent slide in the polls, as well as Senator Sanders enduring the ups and downs of the primary race, including his bounce back after a heart attack in October, while other candidates have either dropped out or are polling in single digits. The Politico piece points to the latest CNN SSRS poll, which shows Sanders has the highest net favorability rating of any Democratic presidential candidate. And the New York Times is up with a story pointing out that with less than 6 weeks until voting begins now, Sanders sits at the top of the polls in Iowa and other early voting states. His supporters' loyalty has made him a contender, with almost 60% of likely Iowa Democratic caucus goers saying their support for the Vermont senator is locked in. That's according to the latest Des Moines Register poll. This could result in a strong showing for Sanders at the February caucus, of course, where candidates must receive at least 15% of support at a caucus site in order to collect the site's share of delegates. Mike Barnacle, I turn to you as someone who's watched a lot of these presidential races. When these polls come up seemingly every morning, and we might talk about Mayor Pete's rise or how Joe Biden has stabilized, Bernie Sanders every time, talk about durability in Joe Biden. How about Bernie Sanders? Hangs out right there in that second slot, right around where Joe Biden is, and increasingly distancing himself from Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, in addition to the word durability, underline it next to Bernie Sanders, you can also underline consistency, and you can underline predictability and loyalty. all of his followers. They have been with him for many, many years. They didn't just sort of jump on the Sanders train a few months ago. They had been with him for many, many years, even prior to his announced run for the presidency. And the survival factor here, including the heart attack, is absolutely amazing when you think about it. That plus the fact that you've seen pictures of him with a baseball bat, he's got a pretty good swing for a guy his age. And little top-handed, heavy, probably, not a pull hitter.
That's all right.
But really good.
Uses all the field. He also can shoot a mid-range jumper. Don't sleep on his basketball game. Heidi, let me read you a poll that was circulating yesterday that was kind of stunning. Gabe D. Benedetti gets the hat tip here from New York Magazine. The Real Clear Politics average on December 19th of 2018 had Joe Biden at 27.5, Sanders at 19% support. Exactly 1 year later, December 19th, 2019, Joe Biden 27.8, Bernie Sanders 19.3. So for all the ups and downs of this race over the course of a year, there they stand, the two at the top, of exactly where they were a year ago.
Yeah, first of all, Willie, you guys never came to me on Home Alone, but I just can't believe, I cannot believe that you guys wouldn't believe that Justin Trudeau would be on the phone with the night editor at the Canadian Broadcasting Company the night before Christmas saying cut.
All right, there's more to this. They do get back to Bernie, but it's just like, this is just acknowledging reality at this point. And this really shouldn't be news. Like, I shouldn't have to cover this, but the reason why this is a story is because this is so rare. It is so incredibly rare to see the Sanders campaign actually covered objectively, looking at how strong his support base is, looking at his individual donors, looking at his transformative message. I mean, this just does not happen. This was not going on for the entirety of this primary race up until now. So something flipped on Christmas Day where all of a sudden they're being a lot more charitable to the Bernie Sanders campaign and his ability to win. But again, I mean, in this segment, it's largely positive. In the other segment, you can see them kind of angling for something different, whether it's acting like, the establishment now loves Bernie Sanders, which is absurd, or the idea that he can't defeat Trump because he has to be able to appeal to Republican voters, which he doesn't have to. The whole idea is you bring out non-voters, you bring out young people, you bring out independents. That's Bernie Sanders. That's his who he appeals to and how he will defeat Donald Trump. So, like, I'm not really sure what their angle is here, because usually the corporate media, I mean, what they've done so far is they barely covered Bernie. So a lot of it's a Bernie blackout because it's kind of hard to criticize a man who's been this consistent for 40 years. But when they have covered him, it's been largely negative, usually on his electability. But now they're covering him and actually talking about, wow, he can actually win. And the coverage here has been largely positive. So this entire thing has been very shocking to me. I think maybe, because the media has been so wrong about everything, their idea now is that, well, since we were wrong the entire time about this entire primary race, maybe if we talk about Bernie's fantastic chances, we'll also be wrong about that. Then he won't win. We'll just jinx him. So, like, I don't know. Maybe it gets to that level. But, joking aside, the angle here for them, for, massive media companies, these massive corporations that really, I would imagine, do not want to see a Bernie Sanders presidency. I'm not sure what their angle is here, except that they don't want to be left behind. I mean, they don't want to look stupid in, 6 months when it's clear that Bernie Sanders is win or has won the nomination. They don't want to be left in the dust. So they're going to be on this story now and act like, see, we saw it before the first voting state. We were there the whole time, when in reality, they weren't there till now. And people like me and the Young Turks and, Humanist Report, Secular Talk, Michael Brooks, Sam Cedar, all these online progressive or left-wing shows have been discussing Bernie's electability the entire time. And only now cable news is catching on. All right. Let me get to some super chats. Where did I stop? Okay, I'm not sure if I read. Craig Reeves says, it is hilarious how the mainstream media is trying to make Klobuchar happen. I did read that. G says, theory, mainstream media wants us to think he's sold out. Well, as I showed you, that does appear to be at least one part of their analysis, though. I've only seen that one host on MSNBC try and angle that, but I don't think it's going to stick. Ruse321 says, found you through your interview with Sahil. Love your work. Thank you. I got to ask, do you prefer social democracy or democratic socialism? So I'm kind of a guy that doesn't really like to label myself, because I kind of look at politics as like what is ahead of us right now, what's achievable right now. So I'm kind of in like the social democracy mindset, but I'm not against democratic socialism. I mean, I would say I'm a democratic socialist. I just don't, it's not something I'm not engaged in right now, because like, I think it's important Americans get healthcare first. I think it's important that, Canada has better public transit, for example. It's important that we kind of fight the battles that are in front of us, and then get to a place where we can discuss democratic socialism seriously. But I guess you could also do that. You could also have that as sort of the end goal or the ultimate goal, and still be able to discuss like public housing or whatever it is, higher wages. So yeah, definitely. I would consider myself more of a democratic socialist. I just don't, it's not a discussion I'm really all that engaged in. But thank you for the question. Mateus N says, as a Canadian, what's your thought on Tim Hortons? It's at least the only place I can think of that combines bakery and fast food. Sorry, I was reading your last. Here's some. I was like, what's NOKs? Kroners. So Tim Hortons is all right. Here's the problem. Tim Hortons is now owned by a massive company. I actually think it's called Restaurant Brands International, like the most, milquetoast name for a fast food company. Back when it was owned by the people that started it, it was a lot better. They actually baked their goods in-house there at each location. Now they're frozen and they're shipped in and all that stuff. So it's the quality isn't as there. The coffee, honestly, McDonald's coffee is better now. Old McDonald's coffee was garbage, but McDonald's changed their coffee because they knew they had to compete in Canada. So their coffee is much better now than it used to be, and I think it's better than Tim Hortons coffee. So I don't go there all that often anymore. I did a lot more years ago, but I don't really. I kind of make my own food at home. But and on top of all that, they don't pay their employees well. There was a whole story about that a couple of years ago now. I forget the exact details, but I remember there being an issue with them not paying employees properly. So I'm not all that huge on Tim Hortons. I like how the company started. I like that it's named after a hockey player, but once they were taken over by a massive conglomerate, I began to lose interest and the quality of the product began to go down. But thank you for the question. Let me see if there's any more before I move on. Andrew Grew says the corporate media angle is the lost market share of the key demo, 18 to 45. News of how low they are for that will be out in a week. Oh, so they're trying to kind of get a younger demographic now is what you're saying by appealing more to the Bernie Sanders supporters. I mean, if that's the case, that's pretty funny. But at the same time, I mean, the catalyst for all of these cable news pieces on Bernie have been those two articles. Actually, I think there's more now, but the main articles being the one in Politico and the one in the New York Times saying Bernie Sanders has a good shot at winning. So look, I'm not sure if there's, one singular, mind behind all of this happening all at the same time. But that is interesting that if that info is going to be out in a week and they're not going to be doing too well with 18 to 45-year-olds, that they may try to appeal more to a younger base by being objective about the Bernie Sanders campaign and his chances. That's interesting. Peter King sends a super chat saying, do you think if Warren drops out, will it help with Bernie's chance to be the nominee or Biden's? This is a great question because I was thinking about this earlier. Elizabeth Warren, she has a base that isn't just Bernie supporters, but is also kind of like a little of Kamala Harris supporters, Buttigieg supporters, Biden supporters. Warren's support is strong among wealthy white liberals, and this is kind of why I actually think it's good for her to be in this race, because she's going to be able to collect some delegates throughout this process, and at the very end, one would hope back Bernie Sanders because it's clear to everyone that her agenda is more aligned with Bernie's compared to anybody else in the race. So by being able to take some of those supporters during the primary process away from Pete Buttigieg, away from Joe Biden, away from any other candidate, it could actually help Bernie in the end, because she isn't cutting. I mean, she definitely is cutting a bit into Bernie's support base, but it's not like, unless she drops out and endorses Bernie immediately, it's not really clear how much of her base would go to Bernie during the primary process. I think it's fine for her to stay in for the early states, see how she does. If she doesn't win a single state, a single early state, and doesn't do well on Super Tuesday, then at that point, I could see her potentially dropping out and backing Sanders. But her ability to collect some delegates for Bernie that he may have not been able to get on his own, I actually think could benefit him in the end. But we'll see about that. Whereas, when we get to someone like Andrew Yang or Tulsi Gabbard, a lot of their support is anti-establishment support. These are bases that likely will not collect much support from, or won't be able to collect any delegates, because they have to get 15% in the state to get delegates. Gabbard's not going to get 15%. Andrew Yang has a better shot, but still unlikely that he will get 15% to be able to collect delegates. So those are support bases that, if they were out of the race, I actually think that would help Bernie Sanders more, because, it may be like 2% for Gabbard, but that's an important 2% when you're going up against, Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren. So I think them dropping out would actually help Bernie more, but it sounds like Yang wants to be in this for a while. We'll see how far he can go. And Gabbard too. I don't know really what Tulsi Gabbard's doing at this point. She's not running for re-election for Congress. She has no shot at this nomination. She didn't support impeachment. I mean, to me, it seems like she's kind of angling for some kind of Fox News job. She's been on there a few times. But I don't know. I'm not really sure what her thought process is. But if she dropped out, it would help Bernie most. Thank you. That's a great question, Peter. I'm hearing more come in, but let me finish these stories, or at least get close to it. Let me get to the Kaepernick story. As I said at the beginning of the stream, I want these shoes, but they're sold out, unfortunately. Well, unfortunately for me, but fortunately for this story, they're sold out. So Colin Kaepernick, who, of course, has been blacklisted from the NFL after his protest of the oppression of black people and police brutality, has a new pair of Nike sneakers called the Colin Kaepernick Nike Air Force Ones, and they went on sale and sold out within minutes. So let me just read a bit from this story here. I think this story is interesting on multiple levels. It's interesting because it's a cultural. It shows you the strength of Colin Kaepernick in terms of culture, and also I like sneakers and I like these shoes. So that's another part of this story that I really enjoy. So here's the story in People here. Colin Kaepernick's Nike sneakers sell out in minutes. The controversial quarterback has been a free agent since opting out of his NFL contract with his former team in 2017. So let me just, there's what they look like, but I'll get a closer image in a minute. I just want to read a piece of this here. So the $110 black leather sneakers feature a white platform sole, the brand's signature swoosh logo, Kaepernick's K logo on the tongue, and the former San Francisco 49ers recognizable image on the heels. According to CNN, the numbers 08, 14, 16, signifying the date Kaepernick took a knee during the national anthem for the first time ever, appear on the sole of the right shoe. Nike has yet to release the sale figures, but the shoes are currently unavailable on Nike.com. Check these out. I want these. Now, so I'm like, I wouldn't call myself a sneakerhead because I don't pay too close attention like a lot of people do that cover this stuff. But man, I do like shoes, and these are beautiful. Let me also check. Here's Kaepernick's Instagram page. Check these out. These are freaking dope. Like, damn. There's his face there on the back. There's his K there on the front. So cool. And look, this shows you, like, as I was saying, this shows you his, like, this idea that conservatives try to peddle out here. Oh, Colin Kaepernick. I mean, this guy is crazy. He's, what is he doing? I mean, he hates America. He really hates America. And here his shoes sell out in minutes. Like, this should help show you that we are winning the culture war. It may not be obvious by who's president right now, but the reason why, again, not to go over 2016 completely, but the reason why Trump is president is because Hillary Clinton was a horrible candidate, not because Donald Trump was an amazing candidate that everyone loved. So if you have someone that can actually speak to real people, get out a lot of non-voters out to vote against Trump in 2020, then Trump is going to lose in a landslide. Culturally, we are winning. So not even just on policy. Our policies like, you know, Medicare for all, free public college, higher wages, dealing with climate change with a serious plan. These are all popular policies. But on top of that, culturally, you can see that people actually are on our side as well. So Kaepernick is actually a beloved figure, despite what people tell you. Even this, I'm not even a fan of this People headline here, calling him a controversial figure. He's not really a controversial figure. He's only controversial for, you know, a few wealthy owners in the NFL and conservative circles. But otherwise, Colin Kaepernick is incredibly popular, and the fact that these shoes sold out as quickly as they did show you that we, in fact, are winning the culture war, and it's only a matter of time until we see the an example of that actually bear out when it comes to politics. So there you go. If anybody got these, if you have 10.5 or 11, let me know. I would like these shoes. All right. So we got 3 more stories here before I get to all the super chats and any other comments that come up. Let me get to some of those first. All right. Arjan Sahota says, how about Senator Tammy Baldwin for Bernie's VP? She is a woman, gay from Wisconsin, has been a progressive for a while. She might appeal to Midwest voters and identify voters. Hi from Vancouver. I got to be honest, I don't pay too much attention to Tammy Baldwin. I haven't heard that she is all that progressive. She never comes up in conversation. Nina Turner is my VP. So, I mean, my eye is on Nina Turner, on Rashida Tlaib, on Barbara Lee would also be a solid choice. My eye are on people that are actually fighters, that there are examples of them standing up to people in power, standing up against what everyone else was saying and standing up for what is right. So Rashida Tlaib obviously has done that for a while. Nina Turner has done that for a while. Barbara Lee, her vote against the war in Afghanistan, the lone vote in the House against the war in Afghanistan, that shows you that she has been on the correct side of history, has been willing to stand up when everyone else was doing something different. So all 3 of these, I think, would be fantastic choices. Nina Turner is always my first choice because I just think she's awesome. So I don't really. I think Tammy Baldwin is not wouldn't be on my radar for VP. But thank you for the super chat. Balthazar says Warren T. Voigt's support base is like her policies, pale imitations of others that appeal to no one. Bland betrayals, she has a plan for that. Yeah. I mean, her support's dropping. Like, when Warren was rising, like, the stories that I covered, there is a reason I cover them, right? Like, I'm not going to be covering... I have no reason right now to really go after Warren when she is losing her support. And as I discussed earlier, her delegates could be useful at the convention. So, like, for me, there's no reason to really go after Warren. The focus right now really is Biden and Buttigieg. Buttigieg, just because he's strong right now in Iowa. Biden, because he's in first place overall in national polling. So I think that's where our focus should be in terms of criticizing other candidates. Pertherian says, I thought you meant Nike sold out and not sold out of his shoes. Well, hopefully that became clear. Heather Adele Tate sends a little, what does it say? How's it going? Sends me a sticker saying, how's it going? I'm going well. How are you going, Heather? Thank you for the super chat. All right, let me get to the next story here. This one, I didn't really prep too much. I don't know if I want to cover this. Let me just cover this briefly, just because I don't really know. You're going to see what I'm saying. I don't know what else I can really add to this story, except for the fact that this is not surprising at all, as you're going to see what I'm talking about. '20 candidate and billionaire Michael Bloomberg used prison labor to make campaign calls. Now, this is a story that is crazy, but also not all that surprising and kind of humorous, actually, because of how absurd this entire thing is. So let me show you the story here. This was broken. The story broke in The Intercept. So John Washington tweets out here, Scoop, Bloomberg's campaign was using prison labor to make campaign calls. They said they canceled the contract yesterday when I asked them about it. My latest for The Intercept. So Michael Bloomberg has spent something like $100 million on campaign ads. $100 million. Bernie Sanders has spent, I believe, about $8 million is the count that I saw. So we're talking like Bloomberg is using his own money for his own vanity project here to raise his own profile, not only on campaign ads, but on prison labor. So to be, I guess, super charitable here, this was through a third-party contractor. So potentially he didn't know. I mean, you would imagine if the campaign knew they were using prison labor that they would make sure they weren't doing that. Because of how horrible it looks for a billionaire to, cheap out when it comes to paying people to help his campaign. But even apart from that, I thought like real people were supposed to be doing this. Like actual volunteers were supposed to be the ones phone banking. He has no real support, so he has to pay people to phone bank for him. I got to be honest with you. I didn't even really know this was a thing. I just figured, you phone bank for who you want to phone bank for. I guess I never really clued into the fact that, yeah, you could pay other people just to phone bank for you. I mean, the whole story is absurd to me. Let me just read a little piece of it here. Again, The Intercept broke it. Mike Bloomberg exploited prison labor to make 2020 presidential campaign calls. Let me zoom in a little bit so I can see this. So, former New York City mayor and multi-billionaire Democratic candidate Mike Bloomberg used prison labor to make campaign calls through a third-party vendor. The Mike Bloomberg campaign contracted New Jersey-based call center company Procom, which runs call centers in New Jersey and Oklahoma. Two of the call centers in Oklahoma are operated out of state prisons, in at least one of the two prisons, incarcerated people were contracted to make calls on behalf of the Bloomberg campaign. According to a source who asked for anonymity for fear of retribution, people incarcerated at the Dr. Eddie Warrior Correctional Center, a minimum security women's prison with a capacity of more than 900, were making calls to California on behalf of Bloomberg. The people were required to end their calls by disclosing that the calls were paid for by the Bloomberg campaign. They did not disclose, however, that they were calling from behind bars. All right. I'm not going to read this whole story again. Go to The Intercept to get the entire piece here. But this is kind of, I almost don't even know what to say here, because Bloomberg has no real support. Like, he's essentially trying to buy his way into this nomination. But I don't think it's going to work. You could spend a lot of money, and yes, I guess you'll raise your name recognition. But if you saw my video covering the focus group that watched the last debate, the December debate, at one point, I didn't cover it in that video, but there's a part of that focus group where they discuss Michael Bloomberg. And Frank Luntz asks the focus group, hey, if Michael Bloomberg was on this debate stage or in this, in this race, do you support Michael Bloomberg, or would you support him, when you go to vote? Not one person in that room raised their hand. Everybody in that room, and it was a big focus group, were against the idea of Michael Bloomberg running. So I think people are seeing through this. They don't want a billionaire. And I even think Michael Bloomberg himself knows he doesn't really have a shot at this nomination, but he may potentially try and run a third-party candidacy if, say, Bernie Sanders wins the nomination. But even in that scenario, I really question how much support he would actually get. I mean, you're going to get, the Joe Scarborough vote, the wealthy, newscaster, people that run massive corporations that are worth billions. You'll get their vote. You get Jeff Bezos' vote, but are you going to get the vote of, even 5% of people in the country? I don't think so. And I think potentially a lot of his support, if he were to run a third-party candidacy, a lot of his support could come from Republicans, could come from, Republican wealthy people that also, sure, they don't want Sanders, but they also don't like how Trump is so, overtly terrible. They may vote for a Michael Bloomberg. I don't really know who this hurts. What a third-party run, who it would hurt. I guess you could say it would hurt Bernie in the sense that it would potentially give some Democratic voters that have been misinformed by cable news to not vote for Bernie. But in the conversation of that process, it has to obviously be discussed, and it would just be obvious to anybody that would be spoiling the election, and you would hand it to Donald Trump, which Democratic voters also don't want. So, look, a lot of this right now is just predictions. We don't even know if he'll run as a third-party candidate, but I can't imagine he thinks he has a shot at this nomination. He has almost no support. He's trying to buy his support. It's not really working. And with stories like this coming out, how far can you really get? So there's that. Maybe as an addition to this story, let me just bring this up, because this was hilarious. Bloomberg put this story out. Again, this is this is a website that Michael Bloomberg owns, but he's not supposed to be in contact with the reporting. But clearly, you got some kiss asses working on the Bloomberg website, posting this story. Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren have hammered Amazon on the stump, but their campaigns have also spent hundreds of thousands of dollars buying supplies off the site. Oh no, can't support them now. I guess I got to support Michael Bloomberg. Like, who is this story for? This is the mindset of these dipshits that, run the media. They think this is actually going to work on people. As Ryan Grimm here says, this is a cartoon. This cartoon, in fact, we should improve society somewhat. Yet you participate in society. Curious. I am very intelligent. That's it. That's the story. This idea that you can't participate in a society that you want to improve is crazy. That's just the nature of how politics works. Like, otherwise, what's the option? Fight for nothing and just be always happy with the status quo? No, you want to improve things. You want to change things. So, yeah, there are parts of society that it'd be nice if I didn't have to do them. Like, it'd be great if I didn't have to drive a car that uses gas, but I can't afford an electric car. It'd be nice if I didn't have to fly in an airplane, but sometimes I got to go places. Like, sure, it'd be nice if these campaigns didn't use Amazon, but everything. I mean, Amazon essentially controls the internet when it comes to shopping. You can get anything on there and get it immediately, and that's important for campaigns that have to be nimble. So, yes, like all of this, like these kinds of criticisms are just so ignorant of the fact that inherently we have to live and participate in a society that we are trying to improve. And I don't even know what else to add to that. I mean, it shows you that it shows you that people that work for Bloomberg and Bloomberg himself are really disconnected from reality. Let's just see who wrote this, because I'm just curious. Spencer Soper. All right. This guy is clearly trying to angle for a promotion. So there you go. What an absurd story. All right. Enough of Bloomberg. Why do I even talk about it? This is what I mean. Like, I almost didn't cover this story because Bloomberg is not important. But you never know. You never know if he tries to pull something like a third-party run. It's important to already have a base of knowledge of who Bloomberg is. All right, I got 2 small stories left, including weekly polling, as I normally get. But first, what is first? This is first. CNN saying something again that is intelligent. I'll explain it in a second. I don't want to spoil it all now. Actually, first, let me get to some super chats. All right. Jander VK says Bernie's New Balance coming out next week. I assume you're joking, but that would be awesome. If Bernie Sanders had shoes, I would totally get those. Balenciaga has those. Let me see if I can pull them up. I think it's Balenciaga. I'm not sure if you guys remember these. One second. Remember these things? That's not zooming in. But these shoes here. They're not really Bernie shoes, but it's the same branding. But I want some actual, like Kaepernick Nikes with the face and everything, with the logo. I want some Bernie Nikes. That would be incredible. But anyways, I'm spoiling the story here. Oh no, we'll get to that. Where was I? J-Mac. No, I said that already. No, I didn't. J-Mac says, the idea of this Midwestern appeal doesn't make sense to me. Trump won the Midwest despite being a trust-funded billionaire from New York City. I'm not sure what this comment is in relation to. Midwestern appeal. Yeah, well, I mean, Trump not even just won the Midwest. Trump won the election because Hillary didn't bring out the base. And Hillary, I mean, again, she still won by 3 million votes. But in terms of the Electoral College, she wasn't able to bring out the votes in the places that it mattered. Those people just stayed home. So, like, it's not like Trump brought out, like, a record number of voters in the election. He lost. I mean, he won because Hillary wasn't able to bring out enough voters. So it's less about Trump's strength and more about Hillary's failures. But thank you, J-Mac. All right, this CNN clip, then we'll get to the Bernie polls and then finish super chats and all that stuff. So Chris Cillizza of CNN has notoriously terrible takes on the Democratic primary, but recently, for the wrap up of 2019, he was on CNN and discussed Hillary Clinton and was incredibly critical of Hillary Clinton in ways that may actually surprise you. So I want to share this just because it's a surprising video. This is in no way of me supporting Chris Cillizza, because as I said, usually he is horrible. But it's interesting to see him say these things, as you will see.
Go to the next one again. I want to see. Okay. So people will say, Hillary Clinton, Chris, all you do is fixate on Hillary Clinton, leave her alone. She ran in 2016. Look, Hillary Clinton has every right to be part of the national conversation. She was the party's presidential nominee 3 years ago. She was the Secretary of State. She was a senator from New York, and she was the First Lady. She has a resume unlike anyone else in the party and really in the country. But she's done a couple things that I think don't make sense from a party building perspective or really a public figure perspective. One, why did she attack Tulsi Gabbard and suggest that Tulsi Gabbard, the Hawaii congresswoman, was a Russian asset? If you're going to say that, that's a pretty big charge. If I say John Berman is a Russian asset and they say, well, what's your evidence? I say he likes the Boston Celtics. That doesn't, right? If you're going to make a big charge and you're Hillary Clinton, you know it's going to get attention. I just think you have to be way more cognizant of what your impact is. Then another thing with Hillary Clinton, she is talking all about Bernie Sanders in the 2016 race and how, well, he didn't get out soon enough. And had he gotten out, I probably would have won, and he better not do it again. I don't see what the strategy is. Maybe it's just she feels free. She's not running for anything else, and she wants to say what she wants, which is her right.
That might be the
but it's
answer.
also our right to say some of these choices you're making are not good for either your public image or, and this is more important, for your party. It's hard to argue that getting in a fight with Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard, if you're Hillary Clinton, is beneficial to helping Democrats win in 2020, which is her stated goal.
Fair enough. The Howard Stern interview, very revealing. Maybe she was just stream of consciousness speaking her mind.
Go to the next.
So that was surprising. It's surprising to see, an actual solid critique of Hillary Clinton. Again, similar things that I've been talking about, that other progressive YouTubers, leftist YouTubers have been talking about in regards to Hillary Clinton, her calling Tulsi Gabbard a Russian asset. Like, I've been incredibly critical of Tulsi Gabbard and, her present vote when it comes to impeachment, her backtracking on issues like Medicare for all, her not running for re-election. Like, I really don't even know why she's still in this 2020 race. But to call Tulsi Gabbard a Russian asset serves no purpose. There was no reason to say that. And in fact, it ended up helping Tulsi Gabbard in the end. Her support, Tulsi's support, grew because she was discussed in the press, and people were able to recognize that Hillary Clinton was being ridiculous, and to call Tulsi Gabbard a Russian asset and have no evidence of anything is just stupid. And the Bernie Sanders thing, when she was on Howard Stern, I covered that as well. Hillary Clinton went after Bernie Sanders, essentially saying, "Oh, he hurt me. He definitely hurt me in 2016." Even though you go over all the data, nobody campaigned more for Hillary Clinton in 2016 than Bernie Sanders, except for her own family. Except for Chelsea and Bill, Bernie Sanders campaigned the most for Hillary Clinton. He did everything he could to make sure Trump didn't win. And on top of that, much more of Bernie's supporters voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016 than Hillary voters voted for Obama in 2008. So, there's tons of data on that. In no way at all did Bernie Sanders hurt her, yet she continues to bring out this BS. Hillary herself in 2016 discussed how Bernie Sanders was amazing, campaigning for her all over the country, and she was so happy that they were both on the same side in the end. Like, again, she's just... The mistake that Chris Cillizza kind of makes here is in thinking that Hillary Clinton cares at all about the Democratic Party. She doesn't. Hillary Clinton cares about herself and her power. If she loses power of the Democratic Party and it becomes the Bernie Sanders party, I guarantee you she will talk about how the party should be doing different things. Like, there is zero chance she will hop on board the Bernie train and talk up how awesome Bernie Sanders is. It's not going to happen. At most, she'll say, "Well, you shouldn't vote for Trump." Like, but she's not going to be. And also, I don't think anybody wants her out there campaigning for Bernie Sanders in 2020. But that's not like all she cares about is herself and her hold on power. I'm with her in 2016. That was her slogan. Doesn't that tell you everything? Bernie Sanders, his slogan, "Not me, us." This tells you exactly why Bernie Sanders has such a solid support base and why Hillary Clinton was not able to defeat the biggest idiot the GOP have ever put up. All right. Polls of the week. That is what is next. And then Super Chats. Let me just click through these as I go. All right, so we have another week of polls, and once again, Bernie Sanders is doing quite well. Now, because this week is the week of Christmas, there's a lot less polling, but from what I have here, what I have to show you, it looks pretty solid, so let's check it out. All right. So you have here Reuters Ipsos poll. This is from December 22nd. National general election poll. Sanders versus Trump. Sanders is a +4, 40% to Trump's 36. Biden versus Trump. Biden's a +4, 39 to Trump's 35. Warren's a +2. Bloomberg +1. And Trump beats Buttigieg in this poll. So that's interesting there. The fact that Bloomberg's even in this is actually kind of disturbing me. I don't even know why he's in this poll at all. Let's check CNN. So this is national CNN general election poll among non-whites. Sanders is, so this is December 23rd. Sanders is +44, so 69 to Trump's 25. So Sanders with the strongest support among non-white voters. Biden +41, 66 to 25. Warren +37, 64 to 27. And Buttigieg 56 to 29. I would be super curious to see Bloomberg in this poll. I'm actually curious how he stacks up when it comes to non-white voters. I'm guessing not very well. Though to be fair, both of them both Trump and Bloomberg should be hated. Let me show another poll here. California. So this is Kyle Jones tweets out, huge news. This is yet another poll that confirms Bernie Sanders is in first and continuing to rise in California as Biden and Liz free fall fast. So Bernie Sanders is 24, so a +5. This may actually be old news. Or maybe they're pulling from, I'm not sure. But +5. Elizabeth Warren at 22, down 7. Joe Biden down 6 at 14. Bernie surging. Again, I covered the focus group that watched the last debate, the Frank Luntz focus group that was in California. 6 people went into that focus group supporting Bernie. 14 of them thought Bernie Sanders won that debate. And that was by far the most people for anybody on that debate stage. So Bernie Sanders, his support in California is clearly solid, and it's growing. This is the perfect time. Like, this is exactly where you want to be rising in the polls. Right now, before voting starts, this is when you want this. And it leads to positive press coverage because it's impossible to ignore when you're seeing this much support and everyone else around you is dropping. Let me see if there's one more here. There is one more. 57% of Iowa caucus goers who view Bernie Sanders as their first choice say their mind is made up, according to a Des Moines Register poll. No other candidate received more than 30% commitment from their current supporters. More than half of Bernie's supporters are solidly supporting him in Iowa. And as you see, no one else even close. Bernie has the strongest support. He is not even just, the strongest support in terms of winning winning these early states, and I think winning the nomination, but also in terms of winning the election against Donald Trump. Bernie Sanders can bring out independents, bring out non-voters, bring out young people. That is how you win the nomination, and the election. A lifelong independent here in Bernie Sanders. That speaks to a lot of people who have been disillusioned by this two-party system. Bernie Sanders has a history of calling out the establishment in both parties, a history of calling out the corporate establishment, a history of calling out the media establishment. All of this appeals to many voters, especially many typical non-voters who have become disillusioned by this system and by these politics, and these politicians that have always been incredibly rehearsed, never actually spoke to real issues, never actually cared about them, never showed any real consistency. Bernie Sanders is the antithesis of all of that. He actually has a real 40-year record of fighting for these issues, been a lifelong independent, has shown that he is going to stand up for people. And on top of that, he has the biggest grassroots movement by far, which is needed to win not even just the primary, but again, the election against Donald Trump. Over 4 million individual donations, probably reaching about 5 million at this point. Over 1 million individual donors. No other campaign has come even close to any of those numbers. The most volunteers, most on the ground grassroots support. Bernie Sanders is in position to win this primary and also defeat Donald Trump. All right. Let's get to Super Chats. I don't know why I'm making a song out of it. All right. By the way, I'm loving the support here, and the chat is wild as it always is. It's going crazy, going a million miles a minute. Let me recenter myself. So let me even turn Streamlabs on, which I don't normally do, but you may see a little graphic pop up. Oh wait, yeah. When people donate, you may see one. You may not. I'm not sure. Okay. Let me get to the first super chat here. Hannah Soleil says, keep up the great work. You're the best. Bernie 2020. Thank you, Hannah. Much appreciated and very generous of you. Your donation. Thank you. Cyrus. I think it's Cyrus or Sirius. Cyrus. 1976 says, when a poll says likely voters, it is not the whole truth. That's right. That is true. That's a good point. Yeah, I guess the assumption there is they're mainly polling people. I mean, that is kind of the case with most polls, is that they are mainly polling people who voted last time, who are already registered, who are dependable votes, because that's kind of how you, I mean, in typical polling fashion, that's how you are able to predict generally who's going to win a race, is who voted last time. Okay, how are they going to vote this time? But what happens in that scenario is it completely overlooks a candidate's ability to appeal to non-voters. So a lot of polling overlooked Trump's ability to do that in 2016. He was able to speak to a lot of the conservative base that may have not voted, last time for, say, Mitt Romney, but they came out and voted for Donald Trump. And a lot of this polling isn't really representing the Bernie base properly, because a lot of Bernie's base is young people and typical non-voters and independents. So those people typically don't show up much in a poll, which is also why I think there's a really good chance here that Bernie can win almost every state during the primary process. Now, I don't want to get your hopes up. I also don't want to get my own hopes up, but I think there's a shot here simply because I do think his polling is not really showing the full story. Gonzalo says, hashtag Mountaineers for Bernie, hashtag Students for Bernie, hashtag, I assume that's West Virginia University, WVU. Awesome. Thank you, Gonzalo, for your donation. All right, I think we're done. I got all of them throughout the chat. Let me, good timing too, almost 5 o'clock. All right, if you're getting your donations in, get them in now, because I want to end at 5 o'clock. I know there's a bit of a delay here, but let me go through the chat, because I want to get random chats too. I don't just want to get super chats, but it can be hard with this chat going so freaking quickly. Let me see what I can pull out here. Scott Senpai says, hell yeah, Missouri for Bernie. Speaking of states that are not normally talked about, West Virginia, Hillary Clinton had, from my understanding, I think I got this from, so Michael Moore was recently on the Rolling Stone podcast. What's it called again? Useful Idiots. Great podcast. Matt Taibbi and Katie Halper. Fantastic show. But they had Michael Moore on, and Michael Moore brought up this poll in West Virginia where in 2016 on Election Day, West Virginia, I think Hillary lost that state by like the widest margin. And on Election Day, Bernie Sanders actually defeated Trump in West Virginia. I think it was 48-46. Again, showing you Bernie could even sweep an election potentially against Donald Trump. Wouldn't that be amazing? Like, I have to I have to imagine these things because I'm not sure if they'll ever happen. But if you just imagine it and feel good for a moment, like think of how incredible that would be. Because he has the ability to really speak to a lot of people who just don't vote. I mean, if he can bring out, like 40% of people don't vote. Just imagine those people. Again, it's possible to get everybody out to vote, but just imagine a large chunk of those people come out and vote in 2020 and vote for Bernie Sanders against Donald Trump. There will be a complete transformation in many states. Like an issue, like an actual issue, an actual barrier to that is voter disenfranchisement. Like where you see in Georgia, people getting kicked off the rolls, like millions getting kicked off the rolls. Like that will be what you have to overcome as a Democratic nominee. And that is, that's definitely a serious issue. All right. I saw some more super chats come in. Ahmad Garavi says, love the show, intelligent, objective, and honest. $50. Oh my God. Thank you so much. That's a huge donation. Much appreciated, Ahmad. Thank you. Wow. That's great. Shay's mom for $20. Another huge donation. Do you think young voters are complacent? Online Bernie support, tweets, likes, and shares is not the same as actual votes. As a 54-year-old Bernie-crat, this worries me. I hear what you're saying, but you see, like, what gives me hope is seeing all these young people all across the world and in America, of course, protesting when it comes to climate change, out there in the streets, like actually involved, doing something, talking about this issue. So to me, it's not just online, tweets and stuff. You're seeing an actual, a more engaged movement, whether it's, the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, their support completely swelling. And they have tons of new members in the DSA now since Bernie's run in 2016. Excitement for Justice Democrats, people running for Congress. You're seeing more engagement than usual in the political process. So I hear you when it comes to you worrying about young voters being complacent, and I think in the past that has been true. But in the past, there really hasn't been a candidate like Bernie Sanders that speaks to people, that speaks to young voters. So you have a candidate like this. I think, again, it's going to be hard to get, it's going to be hard to get like the majority of young people out to vote because it's just hard to get young voters out in general. But he will have clearly a higher percentage of young voters than anybody else in the primary race. And if he wins the nomination, I think absolutely you're going to see high youth turnout in the general. But you make a good point. Like if you're a young voter, you have to get your friends out to vote. Get young people around you out to vote in the primary process, not just in the general, because Bernie has to win the primary first. That's the hardest part. So you have to get young people around you out. And look, I hope videos I do help to spread that message as well and help to get people more involved. Big Baby Zubas says, everyone for Bernie. We will win. Say it, everyone. I like that. Positive thinking. Everyone say it. Bernie will win. Everyone for Bernie. I'm with you. All right. We're at 5:03 now, so let me just read this one from Gonzalo. I assume there's no more else coming in. Gonzalo says, trust me, the young gens are coming. All right. I hope so. I hope you know something I don't. I'm a little more confident, as I said, because Bernie actually appeals to young people. But we're going to have to see. All right. Thank you so much for hanging out with me this week. Again, every Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern on this channel. I go live, do this show, and I'll have segments of this cut out throughout the weekend. New super chats coming in. Once or twice during a month, I'll keep a live stream. So from now on, I'm going to kind of keep one of my live streams just for members, just to give them some extra content. But generally, I cut most of the segments up and put them on the channel, so you'll see them anyways. This one, I think I'll keep it public, but I mean, be a member on Patreon or on YouTube, and you'll definitely always get all the live streams. All right, let me just read these last few super chats. Balazar says, how do we bypass, quote, gatekeeper Tom Perez? The party has already made it clear their high brass will step in, and Perez can still revoke the nomination if he claims Bernie isn't a Democrat. That's not going to happen. Like, do you know the freak out that would be happening? There would be riots. Gatekeeper Tom Perez can only do so much. He can't stop Bernie winning the nomination. Twin Bros sends a super chat saying, am I the only one worried that the establishment / ruling class will find some way to alter votes and steal the election from Sanders? Look, there's definitely going to be powers at play that will try to do that. We've seen that with the media. And we've also just seen the way Republicans, with the voter rolls, just let people go and you have to register again. And Democrats too. I mean, in 2016, I vaguely remember something with Brooklyn and voters in Brooklyn being cut from the voter rolls when they shouldn't have. So stuff like that can happen. But this is why you have to, overwhelmingly, people have to come out and vote. So even if there is some funkiness like this, that he can still win despite all of that. That is still possible. So it's not like, they can keep everybody home. Like, if enough people come out, you will be able to overtake any of that funkiness with the elections. All right. I think that's it. Double checking. All right. Thank you all again. I'll be here next week at 3 p.m. Eastern, as I always am. Thank you for coming, and see you next time. Bye.